I created a new Raft'ss speedrun. Let's set the first world record. Hi friends, and welcome back to Raft. In case you didn't know, I like speedrunning Raft, and I'm pretty good at it. But a lot of the main categories are very similar to each other, and I was craving something a bit new and novel. So here is the first ever 100% Raft speedrun. While I work on getting to the first island, a bit of context for normal Raft speedrunning and what makes this run different. The vast majority of Raft speedruns are done in what's called a full game category, i.e., playing the full game to get to a set destination as fast as possible, and that's mostly what I'm known for running. However, the other half of Raft speedrunning is done in an individual level or IL category, where you try to beat a given story location as fast as possible. And the most intensive set of runs from that category is the 100% runs where you grab all of the story notes on a given story island. So I had the brilliant idea to smack those two main categories together and create the first 100% full game run. So I'm going to try to grab every story note on every island as fast as possible, and then beat the game in the process. But in order to even get to the first story island, I need to spawn it in using the receiver and antenna. And to get those, I need to get my hands on a smelter and a few smelted resources. To make this as efficient as possible, I rerolled saves until I got one of the fastest first islands that I could use to make a smelter, because you need a total of 14 of each sand and clay to start that whole process. And for this particular run, I was looking for one of two islands to start off. An island I lovingly refer to as Twins, or one that I call Deep Island. That's because these particular islands not only have the required smelter materials, but also have a valuable island loot crate in an easy to access location. And the more materials I can get this way, the better off we'll be in the long run. So I reloaded saves until I got my desired starting island of Deep Island, and then I swam here using everyone's favorite dolphin jumping technique. Once at the island, it was a simple matter of gathering the materials I needed to craft my smelter, and I've played enough of this game to have the layout of most resources memorized on most islands, which means that island looting is a lot faster process for me because I don't have to spend my time truly searching underwater, and I can just beeline from resource to resource. And that enabled me to gather all 14 sand and 14 clay before my raft even made it to the island. So I could quickly place down my wet bricks and get them drying, because that's a guaranteed 5-minute wait time while the wet bricks turn into dry bricks. And I was going to use that time to harvest other materials that I wanted from the island, like scrap, copper, and metal ore, plus the above ground food, which is a special tool that will help us later. As for the island crate, this one wasn't the best, but was also far from the worst as it gave me a hinge, which is one of the 4 smelted materials that I can get from these crates that helps with the run. So with that loot and a few extra ores in hand, I made it back to my raft to start gathering flotsam and researching the other baseline materials that I needed. My bricks finished drying as I expected, so I was able to get my smelter down in almost perfectly 11 minutes, which is a pretty fast first smelter time. I put my first piece of copper through the smelter, and even a piece of vine goo. Even better, I saw that an island I call Pillar had just spawned in my direction of travel, which gives me another chance at a loot crate as well as some excellent food. That loot crate was particularly useful as it had a bolt, another hinge, and some bonus class, meaning that after I did one smelt cycle to get a single metal bar, I could put all of those resources into the research table to unlock most of the recipes that I would need. The most important one right now being circuit boards. In order to craft the receiver and antenna needed to spawn story locations, you typically need no less than 6 circuit boards, and generally speaking, that means you need a total of 14 smelted copper and 7 smelted vine goo to research and craft all of those circuit boards. Seeing as it takes 80 seconds to smelt a single copper bar, and it takes 45 seconds to smelt a vine goo, that means I would be waiting on the smelter for almost 24 minutes to get just those resources ready, and that doesn't even include the required time to get the metal for the bolts and hinges. That is, unless you use a relatively recent glitch discovered by another Raft speedrunner by the name of Odog, that allows you to craft discovery recipes for free. Because I had the recipe for the circuit boards unlocked and I didn't want to wait 5 more minutes for the resources to craft one normally, I saved and quit out of my save back to the main menu, where I instantly reloaded that same save. As soon as the blue screen popped up, I hit the escape button and then quickly held tab to open my crafting menu. Right before the loading bar finished, I hit escape one more time, and that tricks the game into opening the crafting menu while in a quasi-save state. And because the game is confused, it doesn't process that I don't actually have the materials I need to make all of the circuit boards that I want to make. So I quickly plugged a few of those into the research table, where I realized that I hadn't actually gathered the blueprints for the receiver or antenna yet, which is easy enough to fix by picking up a few extra barrels. With the blueprints that I needed unlocked, I just needed to pull off the free crafting glitch one more time to craft all 3 antennae and the receiver at the low cost of just 1 of each resource that I would normally need stacks of. That free crafting glitch allowed me to get my receiver on in 17.5 minutes, which, just for reference, is the same time as my split for having 2 smelters in one of my world record speedrun times. With the radio tower loaded, all I had to do was get there and start gathering notes. And to do that, I started with the death bait to lure Jeremiah far behind the raft so that I wouldn't trigger his aggro while swimming to the story location. In the middle of that death bait, I realized that I had made a mistake. I forgot to craft any flippers for myself. Flippers are exceptionally useful in full game runs because your normal swimming speed is only as fast as your default walking speed, but with flippers, it's the same as your running speed. While dolphin jumping can help mitigate that difference because you'll get the sprinting speed while you're above water, it's still slow for those milliseconds that you're technically swimming, and that adds up over traveling for minutes at a time. Not to mention that flicking your camera constantly hurts my wrist after a while, and I'm a lot more likely to get lost and disoriented while wildly swinging my camera around. So I made the decision to do one more free crafting glitch to make enough flippers for the first 2 story locations, which was technically a time loss, but I think it was worth it. So with my shiny new fins and a successful death bait, I started swimming my way to the radio tower. Swimming is over 3 meters per second faster than waiting for my raft to travel, but even then, it still takes about 7.5 minutes of going straight in what you hope is the right direction before I even got my first glimpse of the radio tower. Once I can see it though, it's easy to adjust course and go straight towards the first note, which is this little briefcase underwater. There are only 5 notes at the radio tower, and admittedly, this was far from my cleanest attempt at this location. I don't know if I was flustered because I messed up the first jump or what, but the best time for radio tower 100% is only 34 seconds, and it's safe to say that I was a little bit slower than that. Anyways, the 5 notes here are the briefcase, 1 on the desk on the first level, the notice board in the break room, 1 on the counter in the kitchen, and finally the code for the next location at the very top of the tower, which is of course where I inevitably ended up. And after that, I just idled in the water to unstuck back to my raft, where I plugged in the code to my receiver, did another death bait with Jeremiah, and instantly started heading towards the cruise ship. Just like heading to the radio tower, there are several minutes of uninterrupted swimming in between story locations, which can be a little bit spooky if you get off course. And the exact distance between locations is up to RNG, meaning that you don't have a definite amount of time you're expecting to travel for. Fortunately, with auto run and checking my direction before I set off, I have a pretty high success rate of making it to a location without getting lost. And this was no exception, because I eventually saw the foreboding shadow of the Vasagatan looming in the distance. In any percent runs, this location is one of my favorites to show off, because I think the speed tech is so fun, but for now, I was planning on taking a more conventional route, as a lot of the notes are at the bottom layer of the ship. That was until I realized that I was rapidly running out of food and water, and I had stupidly forgotten to bring any of my fruit with me. So I made an executive decision to do the normal any percent route for this boat anyways, because I knew that there was a food crate waiting in the cockpit that could save me from having to restart my run. The any percent route for this location involves a lot of third-person clipping to use Raft'ss' weird camera tracking to open doors that the game would normally consider locked, and by traveling around the outside of the ship, you can climb up the levels a lot faster than running around the staircases inside the boat. And the decision to do the any percent route is part of why I think a 100% full game run is an interesting concept. It involves the decision making that's necessary for good full game runs, and combines it with the high mechanical skill needed for good IL runs. If I hadn't made my decision to take the any percent route first here, I likely would have had to restart the entire run. But instead, my hunger and thirst dropped to the critical rate just as I had made the last jump up to the final level, where I could grab the food crate and eat some watermelon to save my run. While I was up there, I grabbed the blueprints and the code so that I knew I wouldn't have to return to this area while finishing the rest of the location, and then I could just go about the rest of my route as I had originally planned. There are a total of 11 notes on this location, and I had already gathered 2 of them, so once I made my way back to the bottom layer of the boat, it was easy enough to grab the last series of notes by just running through the rooms with the knowledge of where every note spawns. All spawn locations of physical items in the game are fixed, meaning there's never any variation in what note spawns where, what loot crates are where trees spawn, or anything like that. And because I have over 1100 hours in this game, I'm pretty good at knowing where most things are at this point. The only thing I had to remember about this location was making sure that I picked up all 5 mechanical parts to make the car jack, because there is one pesky note hidden behind that big safe. Other than that, it was simply a matter of running around the boat, jumping over lurkers, and getting my steps in on those stairs to grab the rest of the 11 notes before I could jump back in the water and unstuck back to my raft. Once I was back, the first order of business was to unlock the engine and steering wheel in the research table, and then pull off one last free crafting glitch to make those. I ended up making 2 engines, because why not, as well as more pairs of flippers than I should ever feasibly need. So I placed down my engine in its prepared and fortified spot, blocked down the steering wheel, and oriented myself towards Balboa. Not that I would be using my raft to get there, mind you. Nope, I was gonna go swimming again. There is a whole lot of swimming in this run, which is kind of nice because it gives me time to think about my life decisions and what led me to this point. Fortunately, Balboa is the one location that's pretty darn hard to miss. Even if you're slightly off your direction, it's just so big. So as soon as I got close to the island, I found a nice bit of shore to stand on, where I could wait until I could unstuck to the south beach, which is where the real fun begins. I don't know what it is about Balboa, but this location just clicks in my brain. The first time I ever played Raft, I got horribly lost on this location, and I think that it's that way intentionally. But now I have it so well memorized, I think it would be harder to be lost than it is for me to know where I am. Anyways, this part of the run is the same as it is for any percent. Just jump into Mama Bear's cave from above and grab the machete out of the toolkit. But instead of heading straight forward, I'm going to take a sharp right out of the cave and follow the path up the next hill, because this small area houses just about half of Balboa's 12 total notes. It's also home to Bruno's creepy fake children, which I am especially not fond of. If you haven't seen the concept art for what Balboa was originally planned to be, I am convinced that one of the Red Beat devs thought that they were going to make a horror game, but the other ones talked him out of it. Like, why does a hanging doll need 3 heads? And also, why does Bruno insist on doing creepy voices for all of his so-called children? Honestly, Bruno's substory is one of the most tragic elements of Raft'ss lore, and it gets more heartbreaking the further into it you go. Although, to be fair, I am still mad that we don't know anything about Astrid. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to my video explaining Raft'ss story. I'm trying to do a speedrun here. Speaking of which, you can hit this box in the bridge with pretty much any projectile in the game, although I think the hook is the easiest. Then it's just a matter of climbing the tower, turning on the box inside, grabbing what's there, and moving on to the next tower. Plus a bonus risky jump, because why not? The mountain tower is equally easy after cutting through all of those vines and grabbing the 2 notes along this path. It's a similar process of climbing the tower, grabbing the wrench, and turning on the box. But then it's time for one of my favorite Raft'ss speedrun tricks. A jump I like to call the Big Yeet. I'm sure you can't guess why I call it that, but it works because you can't take more than 50 points of fall damage at once, and because I was at full health, that jump was no threat to me. And to get to the final tower, all I had to do was Skyrim horse my way around the left side of the fence, climb that tower to turn on the box and grab the note in the locker, and then finally jump down to the ranger station. I gave Errol his head back because I'm a nice person. I hung all of the tools on the board to grab the schedule note, grabbed the last note off of the gross mattress, and even picked up the food cooler for fun and profit. And just like that, I was done with Balboa, so it was time to get back to my raft and start heading for Caravan Town. Caravan Town happens to be one of 2 locations I find it useful to have my raft for, which means that for once, I won't be swimming to my destination. That being said, I would still be swimming, but this time to do a little technique referred to as front looting, or basically grabbing trash with my hands because it's fast, and speedrunners like fast. My goal here was to start building up my supplies of planks and leaves, because I need a ramp that was 24 tiles long to beat Caravan Town the way that I wanted to. So cue a whole lot of front looting and traveling until that desert island came into view, where I lined up my ramp to head directly to the infirmary. With a little extra boost from a mud hog, I easily climbed to the doctor's office, which you don't actually need the key for, because you can just reach your grubby little hand through the window to pick up both the mayor's key and the note on the table. Then I went back down to my raft and set it sailing around the island while I went to go gather the rest of the 9 notes that I needed. Now, keen observers may notice that this is, in fact, not my first attempt at this run, as I had previously streamed it over on Twitch for my annual birthday speedrun. But let's just say that that attempt was a little bit cursed. And if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it all the way, which means that I needed a much more optimized Caravan Town than what I had previously displayed, and that included actually knowing where all of the notes were, which thankfully this time I did. Also, you can run on this cable over to where Detto's rocket is, and that's a much faster route. Frankly, there isn't anything interesting about getting all of the notes from this location, it's just a lot of jumping around and running. But I did indeed need my raft back for one final note, and it had sailed a bit further away than I had intended, which was another slight time loss. But it did give me more time to gather flotsam, so that was nice. With my ramp lined up for the mayor's office, I climbed up to where I could pick up the mayor's hat and open the box to grab the last of Caravan Town's notes and start heading to Tangaroa. You know the drill at this point. Lure Jeremiah far behind the raft, then start swimming for an unreasonable amount of time. At least I have a fancy hat now. But at long last, the golf ball emerged out of the fog, and I swam around it until I found that pesky little port in the side. From here, it's mostly just a matter of knowing where to go, and I know where the cafeteria is, because that's where I could find the first note on a table, immediately followed by the first generator part in the kitchen corner. Then I just had to leave the kitchen and go around to grab the second generator part while jumping over this annoying lurker, and finally head over to the storage area to grab the final generator part. Then head up to the generator and plug those in to start the box game. The box game is probably the single slowest part of this run, partially because it's just an inherently slow process, but also partially because I am very bad at this, and it took me way longer than I would like to admit. But sadly, there is a note hiding behind this puzzle that you can't access any other way, so solve the puzzle I did. When I finally got a usable path, I ran to grab that pesky note and trigger the flood that would allow me to reach the plantation. Fun fact, if you're fast enough like me, you can actually beat the flood back to the plantation area, and the invisible wall above the box game goes away so that you can use it as a raised platform to make the jump to the ladder before the water rises all of the way. Then once I made it into the plantation area, I headed to the back corner to grab the first 2 duct tape rolls while trying and failing to not get electrocuted, then headed over to the door with the 3rd tape and a note, opened that door with the 3 rolls of duct tape, which is slightly ridiculous when you think about it, then grabbed the note by the door as I headed to the surface. From here, I picked up the note from the statue as I passed by, then 3rd-person clipped my way into the main tower. The tower itself is easy enough by just picking up a note at the base level, heading up to the top floor to grab the puzzle note and enter a code I have long since memorized. Then you just wait for the bridge to launch, and run over the top of the dome and swim towards the dislodged bridge. The last 2 notes are easily accessible inside, with one being the code for Varuna right next to the ladder, and the final note next to the steering wheel. So from here, it's just a matter of unstucking back to the raft, entering the receiver code, and swimming off into the great beyond once again. This time, I approached Varuna Point from an angle that was slightly different than what I'm used to, but that really didn't make a difference. If anything, it made it slightly easier to start climbing the building with the crane to find the first of the 7 notes by one of the excavators. Then I did a little parkour and sprinted up a few ladders to grab the 2nd note at the end of the crane's counterweight. This actually makes it slightly easier to dive down into the water, where I was lucky with my jelly cycle and could just swim straight for the 3rd note. I routed around this underwater bit to grab my first light bulb, then headed up and around to grab both the next note and the 2nd light bulb. The last 2 light bulbs are annoyingly in the dry bit of this area, but are fortunately easy enough to grab, and from there I could just head back outside and insert said light bulbs and enter the tube. From here, there's not much choice beyond following the predetermined route to grab the grabber's note right before all of the booby traps, but I'm actually going to deviate from the 100% route here, because I believe I found a brand new speedrun skip that makes all notes at this location faster. And that's because if you make your way over to where the double doors open out of the booby trap area and go behind this wall, you can not only find a secret box, but if you stand specifically on this raised pipe and jump, you can 3rd-person clip your way to open these double doors and pick up the note that way without the slowness of avoiding all of the traps. And once I grabbed that note, it was simply a matter of heading over to where the end of the Rhino Shark boss fight lets out, and jumping up into the ceiling and going around those locked doors to go through this pipe and pick up the Temperance code without having to deal with any of the aggressive enemies you'd normally encounter at Varuna Point, including the Rhino Shark. With that code in hand, I unstuck to my raft once more, entered the code, and swam off once again. Like Balboa, it's kind of hard to miss Temperance, seeing as it's another huge landmass and all. I spawned directly behind the Igloo Town, which isn't the best location because I had to Skyrim horse my way up a mountain, but wasn't the end of the world either. It did allow me to easily access the first of 12 notes, as I 3rd-person clipped my way into the infirmary to grab that note off of the table, which was significantly faster than my original run's plan of picking up the cables from the relay stations and doing the puzzle the intended way. And even better, the next note was just out in the open and right next to a snowmobile, which I took straight over to the observatory. There's one note taped to the observatory fence, which I grabbed, then avoided the sinkhole so I could 3rd-person clip to open the front door from the outside. There are a total of 6 notes in this building, 4 of which are those annoying star notes with shapes on them, which I don't even need because I can just 3rd-person clip to grab the key out of the locker anyways, and that's exactly what I did. But I made sure that I had all 6 observatory notes, then headed over to the reactor where I could open the big door with yet another 3rd-person clip to skip the blowtorch. Unfortunately, there are 3 total notes in this reactor section. The first one is easy enough, right at the center of the area when you first walk in, but the 2nd one is all the way at the end of the reactor segments next to the 3rd reactor key, and I haven't found a way to open this door from the outside yet. Mayhaps that will be my next grade speedrun skip after my Varuna Point one. That means I do have to do the entire reactor segment normally, and fortunately, I'm pretty fast anyway. I do in fact have a Master's of Science, and know my periodic table pretty well, so the first puzzle is exceptionally fast. The 2nd key just requires allowing yourself to be hit by oversized beetles while spinning an unnecessarily slow wheel, and I've done the laser puzzle enough times to have the mirror positions almost burned into my muscle memory. This part always reminds me of Portal 2, which is another game that I've wasted altogether too much of my time in. But finally, that brought me to the end of the reactor area where I could pick up the 11th Temperance note, and only one remained. Now, this is truly my favorite Raft speedrun skip because all you do is stand on the doorway, reload your save, and run into the wall as the door lowers. That magically teleports you through the wall and straight down into the cryo chambers, where the Utopia code is waiting for you. And then you can say hi to Shogo while you wait to unstuck back to your raft. I was quite unlucky with my Utopia spawn, and it spawned on exactly the opposite side of Temperance from me, which meant that I had to sail all of the way around the aforementioned huge landmass, so I passed the time by building up the rest of my massive ramp that I would need, and paddling to help my raft travel a little bit faster. As soon as I had cleared most of the icebergs, I set off for one last swim to Utopia so I could grab 2 of the 3 notes on the final island. Seeing as Utopia is one of the bigger locations that generally takes people longer to play through, I always find it amusing that it's one of the fastest locations to speedrun, and I'm just here to grab Detto's note, which is a 2-for-1 deal because it gives both the note and the map. Then all I needed to do was unstuck back to my raft and line up my massive ramp to beat the game. Now sadly, I was not successful in getting a bathtub out of any of the decoration packages that I picked up during the run, which is my preferred method for beating the game, so this stool will have to do. And it sailed me through the wall of Olaf's skyscraper, where I could jump off of my raft and sprint at him till he was terrified enough to fall out of the window. I grabbed his key, then took one last leap of faith off of the balcony to land right in front of the big hut to pick up the one final story note and use the key to open the lock. That triggered the endgame cutscene and the end of a speedrun for a total time of 2 hours, 31 minutes, and 15 seconds, making this the first real 100% full game record, which was a little bit faster than my previous attempt. After the cutscene, I spawned into the Utopia Plaza as per usual, with Olaf chucking bombs at the townspeople. And just in case anyone's doubting, here's my entire story journal with every note in the game. It may not be the best possible version of this run, and I think it could be optimized further. If you want to see that full scuffed run that I had streamed, you can find that VOD over on my archive channel. But anyways, I think that's everything for me for now. I hope you enjoyed. Please consider leaving a like if you did, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. It really helps me out. I hope to see you all again soon, but until then, have a great day.